Before starting with the reproduction in flowering plants, we are going to dedicate one lesson to understand the process of reproduction, an overview of this entire process where new offsprings are being formed. Now, when I talk about reproduction, it is the only process by which continuity of life is maintained. Okay, so reproduction, as I told in the introductory lesson as well, is of two types. First one being asexual and the other one being sexual. Now, when I say asexual reproduction refers to that kind of reproduction where any specialized or non-specialized part of the organism gives rise to the offspring without any meiotic differentiation I would say, for the formation of gametes. That means in asexual reproduction, gametes are not formed. Now, you can just rewind what I just only said right now, that there is no formation of gametes, that is a result of a meiotic division, and any specialized or non-specialized part can give rise to the offspring. Now, when I say that no gametes are being formed over here, that means the point of difference between sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction would be categorically the formation of gametes. Okay, when I say gametes, formation of gametes is known as gametogenesis. Remember this term, we are shortly coming to this, but for now let's come back to the asexual reproduction, that any specialized or non-specialized part. Till now we have studied that there are many types of organisms, some are cellular, some are acellular, some are multicellular. So in the case of all the options that I told you, cellular, acellular or multicellular, some part of the organism is going to give rise to the new organism without gametogenesis, and the offspring that would be formed as a result of asexual reproduction would be genetically alike. Now, when I say genetically alike, it means that clone of the parent would be formed. There would be no difference between the parent and the progeny. So, we have clones which are formed as a result of asexual reproduction. There are many ways by which asexual reproduction occurs. There is the process of budding, there is the process of binary fission, there is process of vegetative propagules being formed in the plants, there is the term known as apomixis. We are going to read about it in context of the plants. So, the asexual reproduction restricts the organism to produce its genetically alike clones by the process in which no gametogenesis takes place, only some specialized part is going to give rise to a new organism. Now, this is a simple form. Coming to the complex form, that is the sexual reproduction, we first of all have the process of gametogenesis. Now, in the introductory lesson, again I would ask you to go through that, we talked about female gametes and male gametes. These are nothing but haploid cells. Now, what are gametes? They are haploid cells. If the plant or the animal or the organism, that whichever organism we are considering, if it is haploid, there would be a mitotic division giving rise to specialized gametes. Okay, and if the organism is diploid, as we are going to study in the case of angiosperms, they are always diploid, the organism would undergo meiosis. Some specialized cells in the organism would undertake the process of meiosis and lead to formation of haploid gametes. Now, what the condition is that these two types of gametes could be formed within same organism, or they could be formed within different organism bodies. So, supposedly the organism has both the male and female gametes being formed on single body. So, that condition is known as monoecious. And the second condition is dioecious type of organism, where we have the male and female gamete being formed on different bodies. So, the body of the organism which gives rise to female gametes would be known as the female organism, and the body which gives rise to male gametes would be known as male organism. As in the case of humans, you can take the example, the male body is that which gives rise to the sperms and female body is that which gives rise to ovum. So you can distinguish that both male and female gametes, they are being formed in different bodies. Morphologically the bodies are different, and those organisms, they fall in the category of dioecious. The other terminology that we have for this monoecious and dioecious is for all the organisms. This particularly, this terminology is for plants. When we talk about the other terms that are being used for such organisms where both male and female gametes are being formed in the same body, it is known as hermaphrodite. The example is earthworm. Both male and female gametes are formed within a single earthworm. Okay? And for dioecious, it is unisexual. For hermaphrodite, we have another terminology, that is bisexual. So we have these terms, and these terms refer to male and female gametes being formed in same body, and in this case male in different body and female in a different body. Okay, so this is what we have. Now in the case of angiosperms, what you usually find is that the plant could be monoecious or it could be dioecious, and this formation of gametes takes place within a specialized region termed as gametophyte. So inside the flower, if the flower, not flower, pardon me, if the plant is monoecious, you are going to find both male and female gametophyte within the same flower, and if the plant is dioecious, if the plant is dioecious, you are going to find the male gametophyte on a different plant body and the female gametophyte on a different plant body, and the flowers respectively would be according to that only. So this is what you have to understand. Now I hope it is clear to you that what is the difference between sexual and asexual reproduction. There is clear-cut difference of gametogenesis, the gametes that are being formed. Then where are those gametes formed? They are formed between the gametophytes, specifically in the case of plants, because this phyte word refers to the plant. We use this word phyte in the case of plants. So we have a gametophyte where gametogenesis takes place. Now once the gametogenesis has taken place, there is another process known as fertilization, that is again characteristic of sexual reproduction only. You don't find fertilization, that is the union of gametes, in the case of asexual reproduction. How would you find the union when you don't have gametes? Certainly not, there would be any fertilization. So the next step, first one was gametogenesis, second is fertilization. Now all these developments, formation of gametes, development of gametophyte, these are pre-fertilization events. Now what is fertilization? It would be union of male and female gamete. The gametes are going to unite and give rise to a zygote. So the fertilization results in the formation of zygote. Like in the case of gametogenesis, the result was male and female gametes which were haploid. The result of fertilization is the union of male and female gametes giving rise to a diploid zygote. Now here again I would emphasize that depending on the type of plant, whether it is haploid or diploid, not just the plant, any organism, if it is haploid or it is diploid, now it would depend whether the organism has to undergo meiosis or not. Supposedly the resultant organism that is to be formed, it is haploid, then the zygote would undergo meiosis. If not, then it would undergo the simple division of mitosis, and the mitotic division would give rise to embryo. this embryo would develop into entire organism, and the process is known as embryogenesis. The formation of embryo and development into the organism is known as embryogenesis. As soon as the zygote is formed and whatever developmental changes are taking place after this process, that is the formation of zygote, these resultant activities are termed as post-fertilization events. Alright, so we have pre-fertilization events where the organism develops, okay, gives rise to gametes, haploid gametes. Then we have the process of fertilization where those gametes which are formed, they unite and form a diploid zygote. Later on, this diploid zygote would give rise to an embryo which would develop into the entire organism by the process of embryogenesis, which is studied and categorized under post-fertilization events. Now, this is the entire reproductive phase of the organism. Prior to this, prior to gametogenesis, the organism is going through its maturation phase, or simply you can call it vegetative phase, okay, where the development of vegetative parts takes place, okay. The other term for this is juvenile phase. In the case of organisms, we call the organism is undergoing a juvenile phase, okay. This juvenile phase will come to a halt when the gametogenesis begins, and if the organism is, like in the case of primates we are considering, we call the onset of puberty. That means now the organism is ready for reproduction. In the case of plants, it has undergone the vegetative growth, completely grown the vegetative organs. Now, the part of its vegetative region would become floral meristem, and it would give rise to the floral parts, and their gametogenesis would begin. And it brings the vegetative phase to a halt, and the organism begins its reproductive phase. Now, inside the reproductive phase, all these developments that we have studied as pre-fertilization events, fertilization events and post-fertilization events takes place. And when the organism is done with the reproductive phase, then begins its senescence phase. Now, biologically speaking, the organism is of no use. It has done its purpose of reproduction that is most vital for continuity. Now, the organism can very well die, okay. So, the senescence begins, the death approaches with continuity, with a greater pace as compared to the time when it was in reproductive phase. As soon as the reproductive phase is over, the senescent phase begins and the organism approaches death steadily. Now, this is all what happens in the reproduction process, okay. Now, what you have to keep in mind from this chapter's point of view, that how plants undergo development, come to a stage where their reproductive activity begins, and after that when the reproductive activity is done, they begin with the senescence phase. You have to remember few terms. Monoecious, dioecious is to be remembered. If you can check out few examples, that is good, you can remember them. And other thing you have to remember is that gametogenesis is the term to be cramped. Then gametophyte. Fertilization is the process resulting in zygote, which has to be diploid by any means, okay. Gametes have to be haploid by any means, whether it takes a mitosis or it takes a meiosis. To form haploid gametes, the organism would undergo that process. Because we deal with angiosperms, there would be meiosis before the formation of gametes. So, whenever we study gametogenesis in the chapter where we deal with the flowering plants, we are going to deal with some cell of the plant which would undergo meiosis to form the gametes. These gametes would unite to form a diploid zygote and result in the embryo. Now, the main characteristic point of sexual reproduction is that over here male and female gametes would come and the union would take place. Now, when the male and female gamete would come, there is a complete possibility that there would be genetic alteration. That means, contrary to the asexual reproduction where the offsprings were genetically alike, we are going to find variations in the offsprings formed as a result of sexual reproduction. So, we get to see genetic variations, and remind you, genetic variation is the platform on which evolution takes place. So, the sexual reproduction is any day better than asexual reproduction, though plants take up this asexual reproduction for their humongous growth to take place, so that they can reproduce at a great frequency, as the conditions are mostly hostile for their development. So, they have adapted these asexual methods as well. But if we have to look for the genetic variations which would bring about the evolution in a larger period and would be of great importance for the survival of the plant from ecological context, then certainly sexual reproduction has an upper hand, and it is more beneficial as compared to the asexual reproduction. So, with this lesson we have an idea what reproduction is all about and what we are going to deal with when we take on the next lessons.